Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network, brought to you by the Funeral Program site. I'm John with Kelly, my co-host. Today, we're taking a closer look at an important burial decision that many families may not even realize they'll have to make. Choosing between a concrete burial vault and a plastic burial vault.
That's right. Both are designed to surround and protect the casket and help support the ground above the grave, but they differ in materials, weight, durability, construction, and sometimes cost.
So, is traditional concrete the better choice, or can today's lightweight plastic burial vaults provide the protection families need?
In this episode, we'll compare the advantages and disadvantages of both options, explain what cemeteries may require, and discuss the questions you should ask before making a purchase.
Our goal is to help you understand exactly what you're paying for, so you can make an informed decision without feeling pressured during an already difficult time.
Let's get started with concrete versus plastic burial vaults. So, which is better, John?
When people start comparing concrete and plastic burial vaults, the first surprise is usually that there is no single answer that fits every family, every cemetery, or every budget. The better choice is often the one that matches the rules of the burial site, the practical needs of the installation, and the kind of experience the family wants on the day of the burial. For some people, the word concrete sounds more traditional and reassuring. For others, plastic sounds simpler, lighter, and easier to handle. And that is really the heart of the conversation. We are not just comparing two materials. We are comparing two different ways of thinking about burial planning, from logistics to symbolism. So instead of asking which vault is universally best, it may be more useful to ask what each one is trying to do, what each one is good at, and what trade-offs come with each choice.
That is a great place to start, because a burial vault is rarely chosen in isolation. It sits at the intersection of cemetery policy, family preference, cost, and practicality. A concrete vault often carries the feeling of permanence, weight, and tradition. A plastic vault often suggests ease, efficiency, and modern handling. But those impressions do not automatically decide the outcome. What matters is how the vault fits the actual burial situation. If a cemetery has specific requirements, those rules can matter more than the material itself. If the family is trying to manage transportation or installation with less strain, the lighter option may stand out. And if the family wants something that feels more familiar or conventional, concrete may feel more comfortable. So the real comparison begins with the question, what problem are we trying to solve here?
Let's talk about concrete first, Kelly, because that is usually the more familiar option. Concrete burial vaults have a long history in the public imagination, and that matters more than people sometimes admit. When someone hears concrete, they often think of strength, solidity, and a serious, lasting presence. Even before anyone gets into technical details, that emotional reaction can influence the decision. There is also the practical side. Concrete is heavy, and that weight can make the vault feel substantial in a way that some families appreciate. In a burial setting, that sense of substance can read as care and protection. Concrete can also fit the expectations of people who want a more traditional burial experience, especially when family members are comparing it with older practices they have known all their lives. So if the goal is familiarity and a classic feel, concrete often enters the conversation quickly.
At the same time, that same weight can be part of the drawback. Heavy material is not just a feeling, it changes how the vault has to be moved and installed. More weight can mean more labor and more coordination, which may matter a great deal on a burial day when time, weather, and cemetery access are all working together. A concrete vault can also be harder to manage if the site has limited access or if the installation crew is trying to move carefully around an already sensitive setting. So, while some people see the heft as a sign of reliability, others see it as a logistical challenge. That is why the concrete choice often makes sense when the family values tradition and a substantial feel, but it may be less attractive when convenience and handling simplicity are top priorities.
Plastic vaults, by comparison, tend to appeal for almost the opposite reasons. They are often associated with lighter handling and easier transport. In a practical sense, that can matter a lot, because a lighter vault may be easier for crews to move, position, and work with on site. For families who want the process to feel smoother and less physically demanding, that can be a real advantage. Plastic can also appeal to people who prefer a modern, streamlined option rather than something that feels heavy or old-fashioned. And although opinions vary widely, some buyers simply like the idea of a material that does not carry the same visual weight as concrete. It can seem less cumbersome, less intimidating, and more flexible in the broader planning process. So when convenience and handling are front and center, plastic is often the material that gets a second look.
Of course, lighter handling can come with a different kind of emotional trade-off. Some families may look at plastic and immediately wonder whether it feels as substantial or as dignified as concrete. That reaction is not necessarily about performance alone. It is also about expectation, memory, and the symbols people attach to burial choices. For some, plastic sounds practical, but not especially ceremonial. For others, that practicality is exactly the point. This is why the conversation can become so personal so quickly. A burial vault is not chosen like a disposable product. It is part of a farewell, and people often want the choice to feel meaningful. If the family values a sense of tradition, they may lean away from plastic. If they value ease and modern handling more than symbolism, they may feel differently. So the question is not whether plastic is respectable. The question is whether it matches the tone the family wants to set.
Another important way to compare the two is to step back from the material itself and look at the purpose of the vault. In many conversations, people talk as if the vault is the whole story, but it is really just one piece of the burial plan. The vault is part of how the burial is organized, protected, and presented. When you keep that in mind, the debate becomes less dramatic. Concrete is not automatically better because it is heavier, and plastic is not automatically better because it is easier to move. Each one serves a practical function within a cemetery setting. That means the better choice is often the one that meets the site's expectations, the family's budget, and the team's ability to install it cleanly. Once you strip away the assumptions, both options may be perfectly reasonable in the right context. The real difference is not whether one is sacred and the other is modern. It is how each one fits the burial plan.
That is especially important when cemetery rules enter the picture. The cemetery may have specific expectations about the kind of outer container it accepts, and those expectations can shape the decision before the family ever compares materials in detail. Some sites may care about dimensions, fit, or the general type of container used. Others may care about installation procedures or how the vault works with the ground conditions and the burial space. Because of that, it is smart not to start with preference alone. Start with approval. Then look at the options that remain. If both concrete and plastic are allowed, the family can compare them more freely. If one is easier for the cemetery to work with, that may become the practical winner. In other words, the best vault on paper is not always the best vault for the actual location, because local rules and cemetery workflow can matter a great deal.
Cost is another place where people want a simple answer, and usually there is not one. The price of a vault is never just the price of the material. It can also include delivery, handling, installation, and any cemetery-related charges that are part of the burial process. A heavier material may require more effort to move, and that can affect the overall experience even if the item itself seems straightforward. A lighter material may be easier to work with, but that does not automatically make it cheaper in every situation. So it helps to think in terms of total cost rather than sticker price. Families often feel pressure to compare only the product they can see, but the real expense may be a combination of many small pieces. If budget is a major concern, the most useful question is not simply which vault costs less. It is, what will the full installed option cost once everything is included?
That broader view also helps families avoid disappointment. Someone might assume that a more traditional material is always the more expensive one, or that a lighter, modern material must always save money. But burial planning rarely follows neat assumptions like that. Costs can move around depending on availability, location, delivery needs, and the cemetery's requirements. So rather than trying to predict the market from the outside, it is better to ask for a clear, itemized explanation. That way, the family understands not only the vault itself, but also the work around it. And beyond cost, there is a human question: what feels worth paying for? Some families are willing to spend more for a material that feels more familiar or more substantial. Others would rather put the money towards something else in the service. Neither choice is wrong. It just depends on what the family values most at that moment.
There is also the emotional side of burial decisions, which can be easy to overlook when the conversation becomes technical. People do not choose a vault in a vacuum. They choose it while thinking about a loved one, a ceremony, and how they want the burial to feel in memory. For some families, concrete may feel steadier because it sounds like a material with weight and presence. For others, plastic may feel more practical and less burdensome during a difficult time. The emotional response can be subtle but powerful. A family might not be able to explain exactly why one option feels better, but the feeling still matters. In a setting that is already full of grief, anything that makes the process feel simpler and more reassuring can have real value. So the better vault is sometimes the one that reduces emotional friction rather than the one that looks strongest in a comparison chart.
That is why it helps to separate symbolism from function. Symbolically, concrete may resonate with people who want something classic, solid, and familiar. Plastic may resonate with people who want something less cumbersome and more straightforward. Functionally, both are being considered because they serve the same broad purpose in the burial process. Once you accept that, the discussion gets more honest. Families can say, yes, we want practicality, but we also care about tradition. Or they can say, yes, we care about appearance, but we do not want a complicated installation. Those are real trade-offs. They are not problems to be solved by one perfect product. They are priorities to be balanced. And because those priorities differ from family to family, the answer to which vault is better will also differ. That is not a weakness in the comparison. It is just the reality of making a meaningful choice.
Some families also think about environmental concerns, though those conversations can be difficult because people mean different things when they talk about sustainability. One person may be concerned about how much material is used. Another may care more about transportation and handling. Another may simply want fewer complications overall. Since those concerns can vary so widely, the best approach is to ask the supplier what the material is made of, how it is handled, and what information is available about the product. It is better to ask directly than to assume that one option is automatically more responsible than the other. That is true in general for burial planning. Clear information is more useful than vague impressions. If environmental questions matter to the family, they should be part of the conversation early, not added at the end after the main decision is already made. The more openly the family asks, the easier it becomes to choose something that aligns with their values.
Another useful question is how the vault will fit into the day itself. Burials often involve tight timing, family emotion, and a number of people coordinating at once. In that setting, anything that makes the process easier for the cemetery team can be a practical advantage. A lighter vault may be simpler to manage. A heavier vault may require more coordination. Neither outcome is inherently good or bad, but the difference becomes visible on the burial day. Families sometimes focus on the long-term meaning of the choice, which is understandable, but the short-term experience matters too. If the vault makes the process smoother, that can reduce stress for everyone involved. If it creates extra handling concerns, that can add pressure to an already intense moment. So when people ask which vault is better, I often think the best answer includes a question back. Better for whom, and better in what part of the process?
That is why a simple checklist can be so helpful. First, ask whether the cemetery approves the option you are considering. Second, ask how it will be delivered and installed. Third, ask what the full cost looks like, not just the item price. Fourth, think about the tone you want the burial to have. Do you want something that feels traditional and substantial, or something that feels easier to manage and more streamlined? Fifth, ask whether any special concerns matter to your family, such as appearance, logistics, or environmental questions. If you work through those points, the decision becomes much less overwhelming. Concrete and plastic stop being abstract labels and start becoming practical answers to real needs. That is usually the most honest way to approach a burial vault decision, because it respects both the practical side of the choice and the emotional side of it.
If I had to sum up the comparison in a single sentence, I would say concrete often wins on tradition and a sense of substance, while plastic often wins on ease of handling and convenience. But even that is only a starting point, not a final verdict. A family that values a classic burial experience may prefer concrete, even if it is more cumbersome. A family that wants the process to be simpler may prefer plastic, even if it feels less traditional. And in many real situations, the cemetery's rules and the local installation details may narrow the choice before the family ever gets to the emotional part. So the right answer is rarely about which material is objectively superior. It is about which one fits the burial site, the people involved, and the priorities that matter most in that moment.
I think that is the healthiest way to frame it, because burial decisions can become stressful when people search for a perfect universal answer. There often is not one. Instead, there is a better fit. Concrete may be the better fit when a family wants a conventional, weightier choice that feels established and familiar. Plastic may be the better fit when a family wants something that is easier to handle and simpler to work with. Neither description makes one material a winner in every case. It just shows that each material serves a different kind of need. If you can keep that perspective, the decision becomes less about proving one choice is right and more about understanding what the family is actually trying to achieve. That shift can make the entire process calmer, more grounded, and more respectful of the occasion.
So if someone asked us for the bottom line, I would say this. Do not choose between concrete and plastic burial vaults based only on reputation. Choose based on cemetery approval, practical handling, total cost, and the feeling the family wants the burial to carry. If the priority is tradition, familiarity, and a more substantial presence, concrete may be the better fit. If the priority is convenience, lighter handling, and a simpler installation, plastic may make more sense. The best choice is the one that aligns with the burial setting and the family's values, not the one that sounds strongest in theory. And that may be the most useful answer of all, because it gives people permission to choose thoughtfully rather than emotionally reactively. In the end, the better vault is the one that makes the whole burial process work with less strain and more peace.
When it comes to choosing between a concrete and plastic burial vault, there really isn't one answer that fits every family. The best choice depends on the cemetery's requirements, your budget, the type of protection you want, and the options available in your area.
The most important thing is to understand what you're buying. Ask questions, compare the construction and warranty, and make sure you know whether the cemetery requires a burial vault or simply an outer burial container.
Thank you for joining us today on the Funeral Channel Network, brought to you by the Funeral Program site. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to follow the podcast and share it with someone who may be planning a funeral or making cemetery arrangements.
Until next time, take care, and thanks for listening. Bye for now.